should we go through a roster? It looks like there's a list here. Maybe we'll just go in alphabetical order.
Yeah, I think that sounds good.
Okay. Emma, do you want to do roll call?
Yes, let me get this up. So we'll start with John.
Hey, good morning, good evening, everyone. My name is John Corky. I am the founder of a digital health startup in Charlotte, North Carolina, addressing Alzheimer's disease. We are using wearable devices to passively and unobtrusively collect patient data, behavioral data specifically, to understand how we can reduce the risk of onset or delay the progression of disease. So that's a little bit about me. Early in my new career doing this, I just transitioned from a completely different career into founding this company. So welcome to learning more about everybody else's stuff.
Terrific.
Great. Thank you. Jacqueline is next.
So hello, Emma and John and everyone. Nice to see you. I'm from Hong Kong. This is the second day of the Mid-Autumn Festival, and our work is about using AI technologies to identify early biomarkers for late onset AD at the early stage, and also for the identification of drugs that can treat AD as well. So that's what we have been doing. Nice to see every one of you, and I'm very excited to hear that John is working already on a startup that would look at the behavioral markers of AD, which is very closely related to our work. But we are at the stage of research, not yet at the stage of startup yet, but very excited to hear about that. Thank you.
Thank you. Akihiro, I'm sorry if I mispronounced that.
Hello. Hello. Can you hear me?
Hello. We can. Yes.
Yes.
Hi. My name is Akihiro from Japan. Also, I'm a group leader in the National Institute for Material Science, and I'm an electrochemist. I'm a very basic scientist, and I got a catalytic award for electrochemical sensor for the microbiome. So my sensor can check the activity for specific metabolic pathway of microbiome. So potentially we can detect pathogen, building the pathogen or your microbiome activity by a single droplet of your saliva, and check your oral health condition within 20 minutes. And my poster is in the poster hall. So yeah, if you're interested, please check. And thank you for giving me this opportunity for joining the discussion.
Thank you.
Great.
Bello? We can maybe come back to Bello. We'll move to Lillian next.
I'm Lillian Chung at the Harvard T.H. Chan School of Public Health in Boston. I'm a faculty member there with focus on nutrition education and nutrition communication. Recently, I've started a whole focus on healthy longevity, and that's why I'm really interested in all the innovations that's going on. Thank you.
Thank you. Ricardo?
Good morning, everyone. My name is Ricardo. Can you hear me? My screen froze for 1 second. Okay. My name is Ricardo. I am a medical doctor and professor of medicine at the Universidad de los Andes in Bogotá, Colombia, in South America. I am very interested in the use of technologies to improve educational outcomes in medical education, but also to reduce the gap or disparities in populations that sometimes do not have as good access to healthcare services. so we can address cardiovascular outcomes and health literacy in those populations. And I'm here because I'm presenting or working on a project involving cardiovascular and ectopic calcification during aging. And we are trying to find drugs to be able to slow down the process. And in that way, we can improve the cardiovascular outcomes in patients.
Terrific.
Thank you, Ricardo. Next, we'll go to Stephen.
Hello, I'm Stephen. I'm a postdoc at Boston Children's Hospital and Harvard Medical School. And I'm really interested in how really long-lived animals maintain their health and function over time. And so we've been mining genomic variation in rockfish, one of which lives over 200 years, and comparing it to short-lived rockfish that only live 11 years. And we found some really cool stuff. And we're going to use these lessons to start making conventional models live longer.
Thank you, Stephen. And on to Victor.
Yeah, so I'm Victor Lee. I'm from the University of Hong Kong. So from the similarity of the logo, you will realize that I am a colleague of Jacqueline. So our research project, which we co-lead together, is to try to use AI for social good. And in particular, we try to use artificial intelligence to perform research, which we consider important societal problems. So for this particular seminar, I guess we are studying using AI for early detection of Alzheimer's disease.
Excellent.
Thank you. We just had one new participant join. TC, if you have a chance to just tell us a little bit about what you're interested in, what you study, that would be great.
Yes, sorry, I just joined the session. This is very new to me, so I'm not particularly working on AI in Alzheimer's or neurodegenerative disease yet. However, this is an interesting topic, so I would like to learn more from the experts. Thanks.
Great, thank you. So I'll turn it over to David now, and he can introduce himself and also present to us.
Yep. So first off, my name is David Rhew. I'm the Global Chief Medical Officer for Microsoft. By way of background, I'm a physician, a health services researcher, and a technologist. I've spent the past 25 years looking at how technology can be used to improve health outcomes, access to care, quality of care, the ways that we can improve both the patient and the provider experience, remove waste from the system, improve efficiencies. And a big part of my focus within the past year and a half has been around technology being applied to address the pandemic and also to look at ways that we can improve and reduce disparities of care. When I was asked to speak, it really wasn't more of a presentation, but it was really more in the context of just being able to lead a session where we could talk about whatever was relevant to the participants. What was posed to me, which may be something we could pivot from, was that there was a discussion around career and where how careers have evolved and continue to pivot. But if the discussion would rather be focused on AI, I can certainly do that as well. I'm really here to just help support the National Academies of Medicine in terms of making sure that you all are able to get the best experience out of the session as possible. But I'd actually like to throw it back to the group because much of what I was hearing, I was listening to see if there was any objective or desire for this particular session, and I didn't quite hear that. So maybe I'd like to do another quick open forum to see if there's what people would like to accomplish in this, because we've got a lot of brilliant researchers here. We have a tremendous amount of interesting things we could talk about in the space of AI. and technology. But I would also given the fact that I was asked to talk about careers and how people can sometimes pivot to industry and things like that, I'm open to sharing that as well. So questions, comments, and I'm not sure if you've ever used the raise your hand feature, but under the lower bar, there's something called reactions. And if you click on reactions, you can raise your hand and you can also lower it. So it's an easy way for us to know who has something to say. But given that no one's, well, it looks like Ricardo, it looks like we've got a few hands already raised. So maybe we'll just go with Ricardo.
It's a related question, but it's split in two parts. One is, what is your vision for the introduction of artificial intelligence, of informatic courses in traditional medical education? And the second is, for those of us that already exited medical education a while ago, what would be your recommendation to try to join this field?
I love the topic of medical education because I feel like it's something that we can fix, and it's something that will have a broad impact globally. Let me give you a few examples. I think anyone who's gone through the medical training has heard the phrase, see one, do one, teach one. It is a common approach. It has been sort of like, we've always done it that way. And what it means is when you're learning to do a procedure or learning to implement something, you have to see a whole bunch of them, so like you're like observing. And then you have to do it under the guidance of a mentor, someone who will actually be there, who's done it before, and then they guide you over that procedure or that particular area. And then the last is you have to actually now start getting to the point where you can teach others. And it makes sense that that would be a great model, but it's not a very scalable model. In fact, if you think about it, the number of mentors, first of all, the number of opportunities to see certain procedures is very limited. If you're trying to do a particular procedure, I mean, I remember as a medical student running around the hospital trying to figure out patients that could put a central line in, just because I needed to get a certain number that were valid, certified. And then from there, you have to find people who's actually done central lines, who can observe and watch you, and then are willing to provide guidance. So the ability for us to scale that, even within an existing hospital infrastructure, is very limited. Now think about all the people outside of that hospital, and the fact that we have limited number of clinicians in certain areas, and a diminishing number of nurses that continue to go. This is becoming a greater issue around access to care. And so technology actually has a tremendous amount of opportunity to scale. One of which is we can start seeing a whole lot of these procedures virtually. That's actually being done currently today. And it could be through anything from Zoom, Teams, or any type of video conferencing. But augmented reality, virtual reality, mixed reality, this is where it actually becomes much more realistic, much more relevant. And if we think through the procedures and all the different things that we can use, where one could actually get a better user experience just through virtual training, we've now expanded that pool of individuals that can see one. Now, when we get to the do one piece, that's actually, where I think we oftentimes get stuck, because you have to have that clinician, and we're very few as you get to higher level of procedures that can do certain procedures. Well, a video conference just doesn't do it. If you're talking about a particular procedure that requires hand-eye coordination, very specific elements. And so this is where augmented reality, mixed reality, and actually building that into the tools that people use every day can be very helpful. Think of it like a GPS, a person who's actually doing a procedure. I mean, when I don't know how many of you remember the time when we used to maps, where you would actually print out a map and try to drive around or walk around. I mean, who does that now? You rely on your phone, and it's got GPS on it, and it's guiding you every step along the way. And that's exactly what can happen in healthcare and technology and medicine. And if we think about that, now we've changed the whole paradigm. We can democratize medical training across the world, and it is being done. In fact, we are working very closely using mixed reality to do this type of medical training. And what we need to do is we need to find ways to make it scalable, reproducible. And so that's one area that I think is just a tremendous opportunity for technology and informatics to be able to be applied to medical education. There's many others, but I'm going to, because there's a few other hands up, I'm going to see if John has a question or comment.
Yeah, Dr. Rhew, you mentioned maps. You forgot about atlases.
Yes.
So my purpose in being here is just to share what we're working on, but to connect with researchers who tangentially could, collaborate with us. So we are collecting a massive amount of data from a population that, the data doesn't really exist. And so we're looking to partner with people who can help us accelerate research in AD and dementia. So that's, why I'm here. And, from your perspective at Microsoft, we're actually trying to get on the Microsoft for Startups program. So my co-founder he was a Microsoft ML guy. And, so we're just, I don't know if you have any pathway there, but yeah, that's what I'm doing here.
Yeah, well, there's a couple of things that you mentioned that I think are worth commenting on. One, certainly technology is going to play a major role in terms of how we advance our research initiatives, but collaboration also. And what we found is that simply talking about things and sharing ideas is fantastic, but more often than that, you actually have to share data sets. You have to share data sets, and you want to be able to apply the algorithms onto larger data sets. So that requires a couple different things. One, the data has to be interoperable. So we have to start agreeing on the standards, and that's something that we are still struggling with because everyone has their own standard, and that's not easy when you're trying to do research and clinical practice. But the second is the platforms themselves need to be set up in such a way that you can enable sharing in such a way that IP is preserved, patient privacy is preserved, that you're fully transparent. And what we find is that organizations are unwilling to relinquish control of their data because of the lack of safeguards in the systems. So if you are wanting to collaborate with another party, you have to be pretty sure that what you're releasing the data into is something that you will take liability or coverage for as a researcher and as an organization. And that's part of the reason why Microsoft and other large organizations are building these platforms and the infrastructure that enable researchers to be able to do the type of collaborations and translate that into things that they can actually do immediately. So accessing researchers across the world, being able to pull different data sets, being able to do it in an anonymized way that preserves patient privacy, that allow you to be able to run your algorithms and generate research findings that others can learn from. This is all part of research environments that already Microsoft is engaged in. We have an initiative with the Broad Institute and several other groups that are part of the Harvard and MIT school, where they have worked extensively over the past many years, not only building a platform, but building tools that researchers need. Because if you're looking for very specific aspects, you don't want to have to invent or reinvent the wheel. And so I think that technology, again, back to one of the earlier statements, is a huge enabler. It allows us to be able to accelerate the research. And you're seeing a large number of organizations realize that they can't do it with their existing systems. They have to think cloud, they have to think security, they have to think in terms of being able to be much more ubiquitous. But great thoughts and comments. Jacqueline.
Hi, David. Just have a question about the technology. We can agree more with you that technology is emerging. It's a very key player in this process of helping the longevity and aging. But the question of, in terms of the users and like the physicians, how receptive are they in terms of using these emerging technologies to help them in diagnosis and treatment? Just want to hear from your and others' point of view.
Well, I think that there's many ways to look at that. First off, if you're trying to introduce a new concept or a new technology to a clinician, the very first thing that they will wonder is this going to make my life better or worse? I mean, that's really the first point, apart from whether or not it actually improves outcomes in patient care. Because if it's adding a ton of burden to their workflow, or if they're adding liability, or if they're perhaps just feeling that this is something that could take away their job, that's not something that people would embrace. And we see this all the time, that the way that we approach the problems is we have to start with workflow and lifestyle as two key parameters. If it's workflow neutral, or it makes their workflow better, that's already, you've got to the next point of where you can talk about the value of this. If it's adding a little bit of work, then you're going to have to demonstrate that it's providing a lot more value than that a little bit of work that's required. And this is part of the reason why some of the digital technologies have not been well adopted, because everyone said, oh, we're just going to have everyone capture their steps and their heart rate and send it to their doctors. Well, very few doctors are willing to accept a large database of data that is unfiltered, just basically not even sure what to make the sense of. So you'll find that is not really a good strategy for how you apply technology. Now, what we found is if you can apply AI on top of that, and you can somehow determine that this person is actually worsening with a very high level of sensitivity, specificity, and that you are able to more proactively intervene because this is now the perfect time for that right information to be presented, then yes, that is of value, because now you're making their life better, you're improving patient care, and you'll find that that's something that's worthwhile. I want to share with you a story of sort of like what, in my experience, how we can kind of balance all of that. I remember I used to be chief medical officer at Samsung, and I worked at the time very closely with Kaiser Permanente. And one of the things that we were trying to do was we were trying to look at some of the bigger challenges and problems we had within the organization. One of which was when a person has a heart attack, the recommendation is that they undergo about 6 to 8 weeks of cardiac rehabilitation. Now, that's a program that requires a person to come into the facility, exercise for about 30 minutes, 3 times a week, and it has to be done consistently. Unfortunately, most people will actually stop after a couple of weeks. And in fact, the completion rate for the overall program nationwide is less than 50%. At KP, it was 42%. So big opportunity, because the number needed to treat to save one life is anywhere between 7 and 17, depending on which study you look at. That means for every 7 to 17 patients that complete a program, you save one life. It's pretty important when more than half of the people are not completing these programs. Actually, people are probably dying down the road. So they knew from a quality perspective that that's something that they needed to increase. They needed to increase the compliance for this program. Well, if you talk to the patients would be like, we want to complete it. We just have other things going on. We have a job, we've got, perhaps as kids, childcare, maybe it's cost. And because of the fact that we have not addressed the consumer patient need, and we force them to follow something that healthcare is easier for healthcare, because, you're coming to see us. This has created the dilemma. So we asked the question, could you virtualize this program? Basically make it available so they could do it anywhere on a smartwatch. And we took a look at the core components. It turns out that most of the big folks are very low risk and did not require intensive monitoring. There's no monitoring, really. It's just an exercise program. Think of it like a coaching program. And what we did is we put a 6-minute walk test on a smartwatch. We had them, basically alerted that every day they need to do this. If they didn't wear it, they'd actually get a phone call. They were reminded to take their medications. There was a 24/7 assistance. So anyone that, actually had questions or concerns could reach out to anyone. I mean, it was just all the things that you would need within a program, but it was all available on the watch. And we saw the completion rate from the program jump from 42% to well into the mid-80s. So a near doubling of the completion rate. We measured the readmissions, and we saw it went down from 12% to less than 1%. And that's a pretty dramatic reduction. So we decided to test that in a larger cohort of around 1,200 patients, and we saw that the same results were seen. And now it's used across all of KP. This is the standard of care. This is an example of how, when we start with the patient and the consumer and the workflow and the lifestyle, we can actually lead to better health outcomes, and lower cost. And that is something that we are trying to figure out how technology can fit, because a lot of times it falls into the other category of added workflow, added complexity, and an incompatibility with existing systems. And so as we think through these technology solutions, whatever you all are building, we're going to have to think about the user experience. We're going to have to think about, how it integrates into existing workflows, and we have to think about the data compatibility. But it can be done, and sometimes you can get some pretty great results. Okay. Other thoughts or questions? I see, Joe, you're still hands up. I presume it's remnant from the prior question.
Thank you, David. Excellent.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay. Other thoughts or questions? Well, if there are none, I'll maybe throw out some things that when the National Academy was asking me to speak, they asked, they thought this would be particularly interesting. My journey has been sort of different from most doctors. Most doctors don't end up working for consumer technology companies, and they don't end up working on the types of projects that I work on. But what we're seeing is that in healthcare and in research, technology has now become a central piece. If we want to be efficient and effective, we have to actually become much more aware of how technology can be applied, and also the potential opportunities. We were talking about AI is a great example, but there's so much more. And there are many other companies besides Microsoft that are also playing in the space. And it's just an opportunity for us to start thinking about, not only how can we in our current careers take advantage of this, but how can we learn more about how, where those opportunities lie. And I think one of the things that I was, somewhat fortunate to have been in the right position at the right time to see how the trends have evolved. So my career started out just like many of you as a researcher. I studied, and for me, it was about variation in care. And I was trying to understand, why is it that doctors practice so differently? Why is it that hospitals have such different practice patterns? And does it actually lead to better outcomes, or is it a wash? Because everyone kept on talking about this art of the medicine, and they just kept on saying that, well, of course it's better because doctors and everyone knows best. But when I started my internship and residency, and even during med school, I just kept on saying that some of these doctors aren't and the systems aren't really maybe doing what the textbooks say that they should be doing. And this got me down the whole path of evidence-based medicine, which eventually became guidelines, and which then transformed to quality indicators. But I started realizing that quality is not universal. It's something that has to be enforced, or has to be there has to be structure to it that allows people to know what is the right information at the right time. And that was something that, in the context of a study, I was able to demonstrate it worked. But every time my study is finished, it never was sustainable, because people just don't remember that, or you get new people coming in. A great example is I did a study on nurse initiated protocols. This is before nurse standing orders were actually kind of sort of the standard. Now nurses can prescribe, can provide vaccines, but back when I was doing in med school and in residency, it was all doctors. Doctors had to do, had to order the vaccines, I should say. But the question was whether or not you could just go based on a protocol and a nurse could order it. Well, that was a change. That was a pretty significant change in the practice. And so I demonstrated in some of the studies that I performed in the VA that nurse, in fact, it as we all know, far more effective, far more scalable. But then as soon as my studies were over, the vaccination rates returned back to baseline, because there was no system in place. And so this then got me thinking about technology as the enabler, as the possibility. And in doing so, electronic health records were the vehicle that I started, trying to build into. Well, now EHRs are sort of that first wave of how we've digitized. But as we think ahead, like what's next, it really is outside of the hospital. It's about the things we just talked about. It's about patients and consumers, and trying to understand, how do we get them more engaged into these processes. From a researcher's perspective, it's about, how do you enroll people into clinical trials? How do you get people to participate? This is an issue that we struggle with on the AI front, because when we think about who signs up for clinical studies and who we do investigations on, it's oftentimes a different cohort than the general population. And the cohort that we're interested in is everybody. But that means we have to get everybody enrolled and we have to study them. And so this ties back into how do you engage people. And now what we're realizing is that oftentimes it's not just the researcher that needs to do this, and even the organization. It's communities that have to get engaged. We have to really understand how to make this relevant and use worthwhile for communities. We have to get people excited and eager to want to participate. And we have to sort of return back, find that this is actually something that will provide immediate and long-term benefit for these communities. And so this is the challenge that I think we are faced with. We have right now opportunities to apply technology. There are limitations to it. The limitations are oftentimes based on things that are out of a typical researcher's control, but with extra effort, oftentimes it requires organizational push and effort. You can overcome these. And that's where large companies and large organizations can really be helpful. And we see this all the time. It's something that I think is one of the big trends and big opportunities for both healthcare and health equity. So other thoughts or questions? I know that we've probably got about another 10 minutes left before we can, wrap it up. But I just want to make sure that, if there's anything in particular that you are curious about, you've got folks on here on the call that probably are doing things that you're doing or maybe have similar interests. So it doesn't have to be about me answering questions. It could be about other things, other topics.
David, question, you talk about quality of data. We talk about technology. A lot of the researchers that we work with, they don't have, when we talk about consumer grade devices, there's this choice of using an Apple Watch or a Samsung or an Actigraph or something that's medical grade. Most researchers and academics want access to the raw data. They don't have the ability to see the algorithms that were used to collect that data. How do you see the advancement of consumer grade devices in the use of collecting population health? How are we going to overcome that? We have to put the cart before the horse. We have to start using these tools to collect data. How do you see us overcoming that problem?
Yeah, it's a great question. And as I shared before, I spent 6 years working at Samsung as their chief medical officer, and we dealt with this issue every day. We were trying to figure out how to work not only within our own organizations and with the healthcare environment, but also with the regulators to be able to create a process. What we have today is a very unique situation. If you think about, let's look at the Apple Watch as an example. The Apple Watch is not is capturing EKG data. That is an FDA cleared or requires FDA clearance, but the device itself is not an FDA device. So Apple doesn't take their watch and they don't go to the FDA and say, hey, we're gonna launch a new watch and we want to add this feature to it. What they do though is they take their software and they apply it. And the separation now as software as a medical device, and this now also ties with AI as something that is regulated separately, has created a tremendous opportunity, but also potential risk for how data can be captured and whether or not this could lead to better or worse outcomes. What the FDA has done is they have created something called the pre-cert program. I think some of you are probably familiar with this, which is essentially, think of it like TSA pre-check. You apply, they go through a whole rigorous background check on you. They want to make sure that all your processes are solid and that you've got a clinical track record for building things consistently with accuracy, high quality, et cetera. And then once you've passed that, then they start looking at other aspects like the actual software itself. And that's what we are probably going to see more and more of, that there's going to be an evaluation of the organizations that do this, because there's a certain amount of trust that we have to. It's very difficult for a regulator to come in and look at every single aspect of how did you construct the watch, or how did you, that's just not something that they have the ability. All they know is they want to know, did the watch perform in a clinical trial, and were there safety events that were reported, et cetera, like that. And so there's two elements that have to be married together: this trust of the organizational processes with the actual evaluation of the software. Now, you've touched on a very important point, which is that a lot of companies will only share a very limited amount of that data to third party. And that has created some challenges when it comes to trying to go deeper and look at the raw data to be able to draw insights and be able to analyze that. That is something that we don't have sort of like an easy solution. A large part of it is just around relationships and business agreements. They I understand part of it because of the fact that there's IP involved, and they need to make sure that it doesn't get out there and someone doesn't just sort of replicate their own IP. But at the same time, it is very restrictive, and it diminishes innovation significantly. So I think that we're going to continue to see more of that push-pull in terms of how much data is shared and how we're able to take full advantage of that. That's very difficult, though. Akihiro, you have your hand up. You're on mute also.
Oh, hi. So I'd like to have your suggestion. So my sensor is just like a blood glucose sensor. Instead of blood, we just need to put your saliva or some microbiome sample. Then you can get some information about your microbiome, and that can be a potential diagnosis method technology for many serious diseases. Yes. And yeah, my prototype is actually good for sensing the periodontal pathogen. So I introduced my technique to company, but they say they're not really interested because no one really do this extra job for judging the, for diagnosis of periodontal disease. So, and they couldn't have a good idea for a business. So now I'm thinking to move forward to a more serious disease. Maybe that is more important because it's very serious. So probably the patient will not mind to do extra diagnosis. And a very good advantage for this technique is you can do it at home. You just need a small device and small electrode chip, and you can diagnose your risk for probably stroke and some heart disease, which could be related with your microbiome, oral microbiome. So my question is, my direction is correct, do you think? Yeah. Do you understand my concern?
Yeah. So you've created an innovation, and you are now kind of stuck at the fact that you can't get sort of that funding or the technology to move it to the next stage. Yeah. This is a very common phase for organizations, and I think that there's a few things that tend to work well. First off, you have to be very singularly focused on a use case. So let's land on a very specific use case, and then identify if that use case has a business case associated with it. Those are both the things that technologies are going to look for, because they want to know who are we going to sell it to, how large is the population, and then also will somebody pay for it. And that is something that, because I don't know the area of the microbiome, you had mentioned that it could diagnose these things, but what is the sensitivity, specificity, what's the accuracy, what's the area under the curve, AUC? All that we need to know. We need to know the science of how good this is in terms of a diagnostic, or perhaps as an adjunct, because without that, we're not going to be able to even get to the next stage of determining whether or not it works. So I would just hone in on maybe one or a couple conditions, just really try to figure out a way to demonstrate that this is superior than what we currently do, or is novel because we don't currently do it. Because I love the idea of being able to do this at home. Any type of diagnostic test that you can do at home and make this convenient. And if we can do that inexpensive, that's where it's heading. So you're on the right track in terms of that, but we just need to narrow in on the specificity. And I think you'll find that once you get there, that company you talk to may not even be the right company. You might need to talk to another company that's in that space. I know we've got about 2 minutes left. Victor, I think you're probably going to have the last word.
Okay. I was wondering whether you would be able to share with us what is the vision of Microsoft Medical. Because I remember in the past, I think Microsoft did make something like a Microsoft Band or something, which is a hardware device. But I guess now you're not doing it. So I guess what would be your strategy in terms of moving forward in the medical field?
Yeah, I think first off, it's changed over the past decade. And 7 years ago, when Satya took the helm of Microsoft, our entire company changed. We pivoted not only to the cloud, but our company pivoted from a technology-first company to an organizational and people empowerment. In fact, our mission is empowering every individual and every organization on the planet to achieve more. I mean, it is not about selling a device or selling technology. It's about understanding what the problems are and seeing how technology can support it. So that's actually a very strong pivot, because what we've done now is we have focused on platforms to be able to support. So whether it's a research platform, whether it's a platform that allows for more data to be used within healthcare and providers and digital health, but interoperability is a central piece to that. So we have built out a whole series of ways that data can flow between the different platforms and different systems. Now, Microsoft has a variety of different tools that people use every day, everything from Microsoft Office, which is PowerPoint, Word, Excel, but it also has Teams, which is a collaboration. We've made that HIPAA compliant. It has Azure, which is a platform that's used for AI. We've made that very healthcare specific and added AI capabilities for natural language processing, voice technology, image analysis, and FHIR capabilities to pull data in and out of systems. And then we've also have something called Dynamics and Power Platform that allow us to be able to surface this up into different environments. All of those are useful tools, but we had to make Microsoft interoperable from a healthcare perspective. So we launched that recently as the Microsoft Cloud for Healthcare, and it is essentially designed around making Microsoft interoperable. And now we're working with other organizations. So using interoperability standards, we make this entire ecosystem interoperable. So it's about open APIs, it's about interoperability, it's about empowering organizations, and it's about platforms and building off of the platforms with AI. So hopefully that there's a lot more to it, but that's in a nutshell kind of what we do.
Thank you.
And that is unfortunately the end of our session. So
David, sorry to interrupt, is there a way that we can contact you, or is it possible?
Oh yeah. First of all, here, let me, I'm not sure if this is something, there was an article that was, I was interviewed recently, and you can check this out if you're interested in my story. It's in the chat link. And then you can also reach out to me on LinkedIn. But here's, and so David Rhew at LinkedIn, on LinkedIn. Yep. And feel free to reach out to me, and I'd love to kind of continue this conversation.
Thank you, David.
Wonderful. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Okay, great. All right, bye-bye.